Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be tuning in from. Welcome to episode 56 on Industry Insights. You'll notice Jason Buffington's not here today. He is on vacation, but I am joined by Uber SE from Veeam, Brad Lynch. Good morning. Welcome, Brad.
Morning, Dave. Thanks for having me. I'll do my best to replace Jason. It'll be a tough task.
Well, this is going to be a fun one. In fact, speaking of tough tasks, we're going to try to get through in less than 30 minutes now 10 underutilized, maybe even, dare I say, underappreciated features of Veeam. But before we get hopping on that, do want to mention a couple different things. We are using a closed captioning tool now these last few weeks. If you would like to turn that off, because the default for LinkedIn is that the captioning is on, you can, and I'm just looking, go to the bottom right corner. Or you can go to the full screen and find that even easier, but you can turn that off if you would like to. And one more housekeeping item. Love to have your comments. Ask us any questions, make a comment, but particularly love to hear where you're tuning in from. So drop something into the map. I can see a few people have already said hello. We've got, looks like Argentina, India, a bunch of countries already going. We've got the production team over in Bucharest as well as Atlanta. And Brad and I are in Colorado. Got a number of other countries. We'll come back to this, but what state you're in the U.S. and what country you are in around the world, we will come back to this a couple different times. Always fun to see. So without further ado, let's launch right into this, Brad. You know, I know we've talked about some pre-gaming about what are some of the things that we might want to highlight. Want to give a shout out to your blog site, Lynch Tips, because your most recent one actually covered our first item. Isn't that right?
Yeah, talking about it kind of inspired me to write that, and it's been coming up in some customer conversations, and it's one of the most powerful things and what separates Veeam in the marketplace, in my opinion. When you see, the name of the product being Veeam Backup and Replication, often the acronym is VBR, and people might assume it's Veeam Backup and Recovery. So I just really wanted to highlight the fact that really all levels of SLAs Veeam can meet. It's whether it's backup, whether it's replication, and when we talk about replication, right, it's that true failover, true failback, RPOs of minutes, if not even seconds now with version 11, as many may know, with continuous data protection, CDP. So I just wanted to kind of highlight really the biggest differentiator of Veeam, because it's two products in one when you think about it, compared to what the marketplace offers.
Yeah, I think it's really a key point. And I remember back, early on in Veeam's existence, that was one of the unique things. Another competitive VM specializing product over a decade ago eventually did add in replication. Obviously, there's other software-based replication solutions in the market. But as you point out, the fact that it's bundled into the product, not separately licensed, and I think one of the keys is that fail back. There used to be an old joke, fail over is easy, fail back is where things can get interesting.
Well, it's the same as, if you can back up the machines, but if you can't restore them, what good is it? And it's the same idea for replication. If you can fail over but can't fail back, it's not helping you much. So yeah, I think this is so key. It used to be prior to version 11, it was snapshot-based replication, and we were, seeing RPOs around 15, 30 minutes. But now with CDP integrating with vSphere's APIs for I/O, you're getting down to 2 seconds if you want to. So just very powerful capabilities that set Veeam apart.
Yeah, and it's really a 4-in-1 data capture between backup, server-based replication, continuous data protection, like you mentioned, and then our storage array integration. And we'll probably touch on that a little bit later. That fail back, I think, is really key and worth doubling down or tripling down on. But one of the things, unfortunately, Brad, you cannot have a conversation about practically anything in the data center today without talking about ransomware.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's key there, is being able to have an offsite copy, an air-gapped copy, is something that Veeam holds so true. And all the meetings I have with customers lately, ransomware used to just be this thing you would touch on at the end of the meeting, and now it's the the conversation you lead with, and it might last 80% of the meeting. So it's top of mind for everybody. And, there's a number of things that Veeam's offering that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and we decipher these digits. Probably a lot of people are familiar with the 3-2-1 rule, but just a quick recap. 3, at a minimum, different copies of your data. 2 different types of media, meaning so you're not dependent on a specific device or even technology type. And then one of those copies offsite to separate or insulate yourself from any geographical concern, as simple as a power grid or something like a natural disaster. But in the last year plus, we've added 2 additional digits. That one, which we're going to double click on next, that additional one of an offline or air-gapped mutable copy of your data. We'll show you a bit more about that. And then also 0. And there's an old joke, Brad, it's very difficult to restore that which you haven't backed up. And if you kind of double click on that, it's very difficult to successfully restore that which you have not successfully backed up. And the 0 is just intended to belie automated verification at the time you take the backup. So if there is a problem, you can go and capture that data again while you still have your production copy.
Yeah, and just to use the phrase you use, double click on that. I like that. That one that we added, offline copy that's air gapped. What's really important there is how cost effective our solution is for that. Often things I see in the industry is, almost selling you a whole nother data center for that, and which can not be very friendly to your budget. So, how Veeam handles that, being software only, and, like you said, we're about to double click on that even further, but, making that a very cost effective and secure way, because oftentimes security can be this balance of sacrificing simplicity or, emptying your pockets more. And, Veeam does its best to try to, find this good balance of security, simplicity, and budget.
Yeah, and I like to say, we only want you to make one decision, not force you to make 2. And what I mean by that is if you select Veeam as your backup software of choice, we're not going to dictate to you the hardware that you must run on. We want to actually embrace a wide ecosystem that supports customer choice or already current customer investment or align strategically with where the data center may be wanting to invest. But yeah, let's hit now the next slide and talk about that second one and take us through this. This is a new feature, came out in version 11 in February of this year.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite feature of version 11. CDP got a bunch of hype. Our integration with Google Cloud Storage got a bunch of hype, but this is easily my favorite. And what this is we call it a Linux hardened repository. So really with any Linux JBOD server, this would work with any hardware under the covers. We offer the ability for your primary backup, the main landing spot for your backups, to be immutable. And as you can see in this screenshot, right, is you simply would check that box and define the amount of days you want this to be immutable for. In this case, in the screenshot, 7 days, right? So if attacker were to get into your Veeam backup server and they went and immediately tried to delete your backups, it wouldn't work. They would just simply get access denied. These are immutable backups. And what's so key about this is that even the credentials that we add in with Veeam, if they were to take those credentials and try to SSH into the Linux box, it would still not allow them, because if they followed best practices, they didn't use didn't add with root credentials. That's very key here. And, so it's a very, very secure method that we offered here in version 11.
Yeah, and what I like about this is, let's say you're more of a Windows person, you can absolutely have the Veeam console running on Windows, meaning the main server itself. You can be using proxies on Windows if you would like, and then just step out into, say, Ubuntu Linux to be able to set up this hardened Linux repository using one-time credentials to up-level just to get the right settings in place. And from there, you don't necessarily have to be a Linux administrator, a Linux gearhead to be able to operate this. Now, if you do want to deploy more of the components on Linux, such as the proxies, that's absolutely fine. But I think the key, Brad, is that we're offering this capability leveraging freely available technology. It's not proprietary, doesn't come with some sort of markup, doesn't come with some proprietary file system or have to run on relabeled supermicro hardware. But before we have you actually prove that this is true, because this is PowerPoint, that's all fine and good. Let's see the map, because I'm hearing we've got a couple of countries that came in, including Canada, which lights up things quite nicely. Let's see, what else do we have? We've got Albania, Italy, the United Kingdom, France, Romania, Spain, and then we get into Argentina, Alabama, Ohio, Michigan, Egypt, India, Oklahoma, if I didn't mention them, Mexico, and several other places. So now, Brad, prove to us that this isn't just smoke and mirrors, meaning that someone, a bad actor, internal bad actor potentially even, doesn't have the ability to come along and wipe something out.
Yeah, absolutely. I always like to prove things out. As you mentioned, it's easy to put a bunch of things in a slide, but actually showing that it works means a lot. So here I'm logged into my Veeam backup server. If there's anybody out there who hasn't seen a Veeam backup server, this is it. I have a number of jobs running here, and I'm kind of leveraging different repositories for some different purposes. But I kind of want to zoom in on this job here, which is targeting what I call this Linux immutable repository. And the setup of it was exactly the screenshot Dave and I just showed you, where we marked some backups as immutable and whatnot. So in theory, if a bad actor did get in, they gained access to your Veeam backup server, and probably the first thing they're going to do is go and try to delete your backups, right? Or somehow make them unusable. So if they did come in here and try to delete from disk these backups, first it's letting them know that, yeah, go ahead and it's going to delete your performance disk backup, which is what's on the Linux repository. But it's also letting you know we're going to delete what's in capacity tier. Capacity tier in this case is what's in GCP or AWS or Azure and whatnot. So it's saying we're going to go ahead and delete both of these copies. I say, yes, I'm an evil person. I want to delete all my backups. And in theory, if the demo gods are nice to me, what we should see here is it fail and say that, this is not possible. You have immutable backups and we cannot delete them. And you see it there.
Yep.
And what's so key about this is, some people might be thinking, well, you could still get the credentials through Veeam and SSH into the box. But the way we do this is once we deploy our data mover service to the Linux repository, you could disable SSH if you want on that repo. So even if they did get access and SSH into it, it should still fail, even if they're using non-root credentials. But if you really wanted to be extra secure, you could just disable SSH in general, and really giving you a very secure option here. So yeah.
Yeah, and I like that. And you referenced a couple of things I think are really interesting. Wasn't planning to go here, but we are rocking and doing good on time. So want to mention the scale-out backup repository, just a virtualized layer that we overlay on top of different storage technologies that we write data to. So to your point, Brad, that performance tier that could potentially even be flash or high-speed disk. We can copy that data out to object storage or a hyperscaler. And that warning that you saw was saying, hey, this action could actually damage both. However, what we saw there is, the action or activity was denied. And that further hardening that you mentioned, I think that's just good hygiene. Doesn't have anything to do with backup or Veeam per se, but turning off ports you don't need, turning off network connectivity unless it's absolutely required is just good practice all the way around.
Yeah, and since you opened up a rabbit hole, I'll dive into it. And furthermore, with the scale-out repository, this can extend out to AWS today, where you have an immutable copy out there as well. So now, in theory, your primary copy is immutable on-premise with a Linux repository, and out to capacity tier for your offsite copy is immutable as well. And what you see here is I went and I tried to delete some backups I have in object storage in AWS, and I got a fail to delete backup. And the setup is very similar to what we showed you with Linux, and with AWS, it is very secure. If you had administrator rights in the AWS console and went to delete this, it would give you a similar error you see in front of you. If you called AWS support and trick them into thinking you really were the customer. They would just say, sorry, you told us that you don't want this to delete this before 7 days. You just have to wait. So between the two, just a very secure option for your backups here.
Yeah, and one of the things I sometimes like to mention is, obviously this is to try to remediate against cyber threats. However, there's bad actors, but there's also just mistakes that can be made. So this kind of capability is beneficial in a variety of different levels. So let's switch gears a little bit now, Brad. We're talking about when something happens, sort of after the fact. How do you have sort of safeguard railings to protect yourself? But there are things we can do in Veeam 1 to try to be proactive about detecting issues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we switch to the slides here, perfect. This is, I mean, there's a number of alarms within Veeam 1. We could have a whole session on just underutilized Veeam 1 alarms, but this one's probably number one in my book. And this is called suspicious incremental backup size. And what's so important about this, is ideally, customers out there, they have prevention and intrusion tools specifically for cyber threats. But what this is meant for is a detection tool within your backups, right? And unfortunately, these hackers are just getting smarter and smarter. And often what happens is they don't just encrypt a couple files and then immediately a pop-up comes up and says, pay us some Bitcoin. They wait until you've protected 30 days worth of encrypted files, and then they give you that pop-up. And, your first reaction might be, oh, okay, let's just go restore from yesterday and, we'll be fine. Well, unfortunately, which is going to lead us into a slide in a second, you're just restoring more encrypted files back into the environment. So what I really like about this alarm is it'll let you know that, hey, based on your history and your backup sizes patterns, all of a sudden your backup sizes are way larger, which is a sign of that we're backing up encrypted files, right? And there's more change blocks. We're not getting good dedupe on them. And this is a good way to get this alert and maybe do some investigation and see what's going on these machines.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it, but that dwell time or amount of time that something's lingering in your system and or infecting backups oftentimes is increasing with the very intention of trying to make restore less successful. So understanding this is sort of an early warning indicator. In fact, I oftentimes recommend, Brad, that people set this more stringently, meaning I would rather have the smoke detector chirp too much than too little, right? I would rather have the ability to understand that it could be an issue. Just it's suspicious. It's not 100% confirmed, but we've got something that looks anomalous. Let's just go verify it, get an early warning indicator. But now, what happens if something does get through? Something is backed up, and we don't want to reintroduce day zero threats. Is there anything we can do about that?
Yeah, no, it's a perfect segue into our secure restore, right? So, as mentioned, often what happens is you get hit by ransomware, and the first thing you might want to do is restore from yesterday's backup. And that might take a bunch of time. You're talking about hours go by, you do a full restore, you have somebody come in and do a sanity check, ultimately to say, oh, this is still infected. Let's go to the day before yesterday. And you just keep doing this process, taking hours, if not even days at this point, before you realize all of your backups for the last 30 days are useless. So this secure restore feature is one of my favorite features in that you can quickly mount a backup, do a scan, find out if it's infected or not. Let's say it is. Boom. Okay, let's move on to the next, the day before yesterday. Oh, that one is too. Let's just keep moving on. This saves hours, like I said, if not even days potentially, if you're a larger customer, from doing full restores. Rather just do a quick check. And this is key because it integrates in with your own antivirus scanner. And pretty much any AV tool is supported as long as it has a CLI facing component that we can communicate with. And you might want to still do the restore, but not attach a network to it. As you see there on the right, we offer A, B, and C options there. And you might still want to restore it, not attach it to a network, even if we found that it was infected, and kind of do some analysis there. So a really nice feature we offer to make sure you're not restoring infected files back into your environment.
Yeah, and it was surprising to me to learn when we first introduced Secure Restore in, I guess it was January of 2019, version 9.5 update 4, that typically the antivirus vendors, they have a signature or an antidote file within 24 hours of something being released into the wild. That was absolutely mind-boggling to me, the fast turnaround. But of course, the issue is the average person, the average business or data center may be far much behind 24 hours in terms of their definitions. So what I love about this is even if you happen to be in that situation, when you get ready to restore, just simply update, then run this operation going from left to right here, as you mentioned, and you can actually protect yourself against even having previously down-level virus definitions. You essentially get a do-over. You get to go back in time and get it right.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And, it might be difficult to keep all your, if you have Windows Defender or Symantec Endpoint Protection installed on all your devices, it might be difficult to update those all the time, like you mentioned. But at least you could keep your mount server updated. That would be a little easier to do because that's what we'll be leveraging. So, no, that's a great point.
Yeah, and so let's now hit the next technology, Sure Backup. Referenced that zero before. Sure Backup, I'll let you take us through this, Brad, but this is intended to make sure we don't have a problem with restore, and we're doing that by verifying our backups. And Brad, this is not just simple, heartbeat ping, is it?
Yeah, no, this is something I love to leverage with the previous slide, Secure Restore. And really what this is doing is, folks familiar with instant VM recovery, it's taking that same technology, but applying it to an isolated environment. So right off of your backup file, or even a snapshot if you're leveraging the different storage vendors we integrate with, being able to restore this environment in an isolated network, isolated compute, and do a series of tests. So essentially a DR from backup that does a series of tests. We offer a heartbeat, a ping, an application test by default, but you can insert your own scripts. And something else you could even do is that secure restore. That should almost be a fourth check mark here. So once a week, once a month, you could mount your backup files to this isolated compute, isolated network, do an AV scan, do a ping test, do a heartbeat test, and ensure that you actually have a backup that's usable as a true if you were hit by ransomware. That's a great thing to call out.
Yeah, and that's customizable too. So for example, if you're doing Active Directory, you can run certain AD commands, or if you're backing up, say, SQL Server, you can issue some SQL iterators. So you can actually interrogate the application, not just verify that we have bits or return code 0. You can make this as deep as you might actually want to.
Yeah, absolutely. You can get as technical as you want with these. As deep as your DR requirements require. And you could do this as well for a sure replica. The same would apply where off of your replica, you could do this same process.
Outstanding. Well, I understand we've got a bit of an update on the map. Let's see who may have come in. Let's see. We've got a few different countries. Nigeria, New York, Jordan, for example, have come in. We appreciate that. Outstanding. Keep that coming. And do you want to mention, as well as all these other geographies, something really cool? Brad, now going on 11 years ago, Veeam pioneered a technology called instant recovery or instant mount of data. So this technology we've been refining now for over a decade, but take us through a little bit about what this is and the various ways we can leverage it.
Yeah, I think what's so important about this is like you said, Veeam kind of pioneered instant VM recovery, and now it's just standard in the marketplace. But it's how Veeam's always trying to iterate on top of this. So we didn't just settle for instant VM recovery. We added instant disk recovery, instant VMDK recovery, which I think is so much more practical, right? I mean, there's cases, for example, where maybe your database team is doing dumps to an attached disk and that disk gets lost. Well, we can quickly, instantly restore that attached disk right to that server. So that's one that I love that has huge practicality in the actual, real life. And then furthermore, actual true database recovery. So Veeam is in control of your database backups, being able to instantly mount up that MDF, LDF files for SQL, instantly restore those Oracle files. And then lastly, like I said, we want to keep adding to that. So then even instant NAS recovery, this one I find always gets folks just kind of turn their head a little bit and widen their eyes, and they're like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. And if you were to lose your NAS device, being able to instantly mount that NAS device as a read-only copy, so the company can still use it.
Outstanding. So let's hammer through our last two. One of the things I always like to highlight is Veeam writes data in a portable file format, meaning while we leverage a database or catalog for speed and efficiency, if that catalog should be unavailable or get corrupted, damaged, what have you, because we write the metadata into the actual data payload itself, there are a number of things that we can do. And what we're showing here from left to right is we can take a variety of different data sources, or what we've backed up and protected, and recover that into a variety of different hyperscaler clouds or different hypervisors, as well as be able to go cross-cloud. And we've got some examples of data born on premises. We move it to AWS. From there, we can shift it over to Azure and even repatriate it back. And from a ransomware perspective, this is pretty interesting, because if you should have your primary Veeam capabilities taken out, you can actually download a free version of Veeam, our community edition, or even our reader. It's almost like a PDF reader that you can actually mount your data without having to stand up an environment. Last thing I want to mention, one of my favorites, and it's a little deep, but we actually also have an extract utility. That's that PDF reader kind of a concept. Brad, I actually, when I write my own backups, have the extract utility right on my SSDs and then just put credentials on top of that. So if I just need a file, I don't have to do anything with Veeam to be able to get that data back. One last quick one for you folks, and that is our different transport modes. So some of the newer solutions out there, they only offer one mode, typically network mode, but Veeam, you can see we can do things over NFS through iSCSI, Fiber Channel if you have that, backup from your storage snapshots or arrays, virtual appliance mode, and even that network mode. We rewrote the VMware capability there for further optimization. If you didn't follow any of that, don't worry. Just think about it as more octane in your gasoline, right? We can actually support the different environments you may have, the different investments that you've made, and get more out of that. So coming up, we've got a couple of great things for you. We're going to have a special episode this Wednesday. Veeam just recently launched our Veeam Government Solutions spinoff. It's a subsidiary of Veeam. We're going to have my colleague Jeff Reichert from the product strategy team, along with Earl Matthews, who is the president of VGS, and Veeam Chief Information Security Officer Gil Vega is going to also be joining on that Wednesday session. Friday, we've got our good friends Rick Vanover, as well as we'll be having Corinne Bissett talking about Office 365 or Microsoft 365 and Veeam. And I want to give one more shout out. Speaking of Rick, our Veeam On virtual conference, Rick and some other folks, product management team, actually recorded brand new sessions, posted them back on the Veeam On channel. So feel free to revisit that, and there's some fresh content out there. Another shout out to Brad. Thanks for joining us today. Shout out for his Lynch tips. Be sure to check that out. Really appreciate everyone tuning in. Brad, really appreciate you stepping up and helping out. Hope you have a great day. Everyone, stay safe, stay positive, and we'll see you on the next live stream. We won't have one this Monday. It's a U.S. holiday, but we'll see you the week after that.
Take care.